What's happening, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. We just finished up with Cutdown Day. In a moment, I'm going to be sharing with you a video that Aaron Nagler and I recorded yesterday. You may have caught it on Let's Talk Football over on Cheesehead TV. If you didn't, I'm going to be sharing it with you today. We kind of did a simulcast. But before we get into that, I did just want to cover a few things really quick. Let's get the logistical item out of the way first. The Packers will not be playing, at least it seems like they will not be playing in the Superdome week 1. So that probably is going to become, at worst, a neutral site. At best, potentially more Packer fans than Saints fans. We'll see. But that's definitely a noteworthy change for week 1 because, again, instead of going into a really hostile environment down in New Orleans, you now have a team that's been, really going to be, practicing not at home. They're going to be practicing, it sounds like, down in Texas, probably a little bit disjointed, playing a game that's not going to be a true home field environment anymore. So that is a major advantage. Now, there's obviously a million more serious things going on here with the hurricane and everything. And obviously everyone's health and safety and everything like that comes first. This is just a side note to all of that. But from a Packers standpoint, which is, of course, what we cover here on the podcast, that's what we're going to talk about. And it is a benefit, you would think, to the Packers to not have to play in the hostile Superdome. So we'll see what comes of it. We'll see where they play. Insanely unlikely that it would be played in Green Bay, but it sounds like it does need to be played at an NFL stadium. It sounds like Dallas was kind of the initial thought, but they have, it sounds like a concert going on of some sort that may make that a logistical nightmare. So we will see where Green Bay ends up playing week 1, but certainly still some logistics to be determined there. The other big news, and of course, again, Aaron and I are going to get into the majority of the discussion, but I felt that there were two kind of more surprising type items that I wanted to discuss quickly. Of course, David Bakhtiari staying on the PUP list. Rob Domofsky did a great job of covering the fact that he cannot go on injured reserve, as I and many others had mentioned this week. So if they would have taken him off of PUP, they could not have then put him on injured reserve. So it was either activating him and keeping him out as many games as he needed, or letting him sit the first 6 weeks, potentially practice after that and seeing where he is at that point. Green Bay decided to be a little bit more cautious with it, have him sit out the first 6 weeks and then kind of reevaluate him at that point. But that does mean that Green Bay will be without David Bakhtiari for those first 6 weeks. So slightly surprising, but definitely noteworthy one way or the other. And then I thought really the only true surprise, there were a couple things that I thought could have went a variety of different ways, but I think that the real true surprising one was Jake Hansen on the roster over really both Ben Braden and Cole Van Lanen. Now, Cole Van Lanen didn't have a great camp, a great preseason, anything like that, but he's a recent draft pick, definitely still has some upside, and you expect him to be back on the practice squad. But if you would have told me that Ben Braden would have been cut, I would have been shocked if it wasn't for Cole Van Lanen to kind of keep a recent draft pick who maybe has some upside. Jake Hansen, a player that was cut a season ago, didn't look good in preseason, had a shaky camp at times. But obviously they see something with him. It's not the final 53, so it's not like he's made it as of yet. We'll see what happens. Certainly, again, cheering for the guy. I hope he does amazing. I hope he ends up being a decade-long starting center at some point in this league. And Green Bay certainly has a great track record for developing centers. So we'll see what happens with Jake Hansen. But I think that was certainly the surprising one. Those are kind of the main things I just wanted to quickly cover before getting to the conversation with Aaron. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Aaron Nagler from Let's Talk Football on Cheesehead TV. Enjoy.
What's up, Packer fans? Aaron Nagler here with Andy Herman, Pack-A-Day, Don, and purveyor of fine Packers takes all over the internet. Andy, how are you on this Cutdown Tuesday?
I think I made it through cuts, which is good. I didn't know if I was going to make that. The predictions until I randomly got a punter trade. Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am obviously devastated by the news that Kavion Ento has been released. I asked for privacy at this very personal time. But other than that, I think the headlines are clear here. I think the major headline of the day is probably not even a release or the trade for a punter, although we'll get to that, obviously. But it's David Bakhtiari going on or remaining on PUP, meaning that he will not be available for the first 6 weeks of this season. I can't say I'm surprised, especially given the Packers' penchant for looking long-term. What do you think of that move, and how do you think Elton's going to hold up at left tackle this first kind of month plus of the season?
Yeah, I think the second part of that question is a lot easier, right? I think Elton's been great wherever he's been put, and I think he's going to hold down the fort with no concern, which probably made that decision a whole heck of a lot easier for Green Bay. Because as we know, the opposite of what you said, what was it, Martellus Bennett, who said that they just rush people out there, and
Right.
but no, I think that was probably the smart decision. Although, wasn't it like last week where somebody told Aaron Rodgers in a press conference that Bakhtiari was going to be on PUP, and then he like misunderstood it, but then he checked over and he's like, "Are you sure
Right.
that's like?"
Yeah. He looked at Tom, right?
Yeah, he's like, "Is that really legit?" Like, so
Right.
it did feel for a while that he potentially would be back before that 6 week period, but when you have somebody that's as talented and as great as Elton Jenkins is to be able to move over there, I think they're going to be able to survive 6 weeks. And I think it's probably best for the Packers, both now and long term, to let Bakhtiari get healthy, but still slightly surprising.
A little bit. Thanks to everybody in the comments section, everyone on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You can send in your questions in the chat. Kyle starting us off with a super chat, and we'll just dive right into it here. Kyle asks, bigger surprise, Braden being cut or Hansen making it? To me, I would say Hansen making it. What say you?
100% agree. I almost said the Aaron Nagler 1,000,000% agree, but yeah, I totally agree either way.
The
But
percentages always go up. You know this.
so, I mean, the thing with Hansen is from last training camp to this training camp, he never really looked fully in place. They released him a season ago. They kind of brought him back in the practice squad. It was a complete, I mean, nondescript would be a pleasant way of saying. Yeah, a pleasant way of saying it. And then he had kind of the rough game, didn't snap the ball for Jordan Love, had a couple of snafus against the Bills. There's literally nothing, and this just, again, goes to show you how much we know, but there's literally nothing in the world that would have led me to believe that Jake Hansen was going to be on this roster. Ben Braden is surprising, but once a player loses in that potential starting battle, and then you can kind of get into the numbers and who's younger and things like that, that can always happen. But Hansen really, really came out of nowhere.
Yeah, especially given what we saw out in Buffalo. I just didn't think there was something there to warrant putting him on the 53, but who knows? Hey, he might not even survive the next 24 hours. Maybe they put in a waiver claim on somebody and jettison him at that point. I made the Kabion Ento joke earlier, but what do you think about some of these safeties being released, probably being brought back on the practice squad, whether it's Gaines, Uphoff, what have you, but Yidam making it, the trade with the Giants, I thought for sure, yes, change of scenery. You saw in Buffalo what a close to a liability he can be in coverage. Is this strictly special teams? Is that the idea there? Do you think?
I think it has to be. I think that and Kabian's struggles with tackling certainly plays a part there as well. Right. For as fun as he is as a player and his ball skills, you still have to be an overall player. And especially when it comes down to special teams, you got to be able to tackle. And that was obviously an issue for Ento there towards the end. But I think the thing that was so surprising is Yadam is set to make $310K more than KB and Ento. And I think if all things are equal, I think Yadam, a little bit stronger, a little bit more physical, better tackler, probably better special teams guy. But man, I know 310K is not like, whoa, but like,
it's not breaking the bank.
But like for a team that's kind of tight against the cap and, kind of maybe looking for some ways to save money, I didn't think they go in that direction, especially when Ento has a couple of years of team control left and Yadam doesn't. But sometimes those change of scenery trades, I guess, work for both sides. Josh Jackson made the initial 53 in New York. Yadam made it in Green Bay. So didn't look like either of those guys were going to make their respective rosters, and now they did on new teams. So we'll see, but I definitely think special teams played a major part here.
Das is Was with a super chat. Thanks, buddy. Is Jenkins already the best lineman on the roster? Well, I'm going to say technically yes, because David Bakhtiari isn't technically on the roster at the moment. That's my weasel way out of that.
You said
it. That's how I'm going to go with that one. How bad is Z hurt? Ryan, all we know is what Matt has said is that he's in jeopardy for week 1. And it's interesting, speaking of Z possibly missing, I wonder if that at all drove the decision of keeping Chauncey Rivers around. And I know they're not comparable as play style, but you're just having another edge, a guy who, I tell you what, Rivers, what a story. The fact that the Packers plucked him off of waivers, 25 days ago, it's clearly shown some pass rush ability, some ability on teams. I mean, with Z being a question mark, especially there week 1, I think it makes sense. I'm really happy for him, and I think he can help the Packers. But what a story just to have this guy basically come into camp, got to get up to speed right away. I mean, you got to think that's a Milt Hendrickson find, right, from Baltimore.
Very well could be. And here's the other crazy thing. We're just talking about how like we don't know things or whatever, but and how could we know some of this stuff? How can you possibly predict some of the things where the Ravens didn't want this guy on their 90-man roster? It's not like they cut him down at 53. Like they didn't want, there were 90 guys on the roster and they're like, nope, not this guy.
Not this
and,
guy.
And then he comes to the Packers and makes their 53. Meanwhile, the Texans are trading draft picks to get Kadar Hallman to make sure he's on the roster, not a contingent pick, a complete draft pick to get him on the roster, and they release him. Like there's just, I mean, this is just, it goes to show the NFL, like try predicting this stuff, but some teams may not totally know what they're doing at times.
Hey, wait, now, wait a second. You talk about trying to predict, and people give people like yourself and myself. We're on the internet. We cover the Packers. We eat, sleep, live, and breathe this stuff. Yep. And so do we make predictions at times, or we get asked our opinion and we say things at times, and people love to point out when we're wrong. So I'm going to point out two feathers in some caps this afternoon. For myself, Jack Heflin was back in March. He's on the 53. I know you liked him a lot. Yeah. But for you, feather in the cap, you knew the punter was coming. You called this how long ago? Look at you.
It was a week ago, and I wish I could say I had some, crystal ball or some premonition that this was going to happen. This was literally the Rams had two good punters and the Packers did not. And sometimes you just did simple math. Yes, yeah. Divide by two. You each get one, and it sort of makes sense at the end whether that was going to maybe be a claim or a trade. It just made sense that both Rams punters were better than the one Green Bay had. Now that doesn't always work that way, but sometimes it does, and that's literally all there was to that.
I mean, you got to love the fact that he's got cold weather experience, punting in Buffalo, averaging 50.8 yards per punt in Buffalo. I mean, obviously 8 of those games aren't in Buffalo, but 8 of the games are in Buffalo, and a number of those are cold weather games. And 50.8, yes, please.
And the left foot too, which we know Belichick is
right?
Like a crazy savant for left-footed punters, trying to make the spin a little bit different for returners. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And again, I don't think you could go wrong with trying something different at this point.
Massimiliano, I'm going to destroy your name. How are you? Thanks for the super chat. How concerning is to start with an offensive line with 2 rookie starters? Go Pack Go from Italy. Thanks for tuning in. What do you think, Andy? Is it concerning to have 2 rookie starters along the offensive line?
If they were bad rookie starters, I'd be concerned. But so far, I mean, there's always some concern, right? Like you never know. Maybe they're going to mix up a call or things like that. But man, everything I've seen out of Myers and Newman so far has been nothing short of really impressive. And I have no trepidation going into the season with the 2. I also think it really helps that you've got some players like a John Runyon Jr., Lucas Patrick, some guys who can fill in if all of a sudden one of them isn't up to task. But I have very little doubt going into the season that those 2 guys can handle it. Will there be some hiccups along the way? Unquestionably, but those 2 are ready to go. And the sooner you can start getting them snaps, the sooner they're going to really progress in their careers and be damn good football players.
What do you think about the wide receiving group kind of playing out the way it did? It's kind of funny how it was such a focus this offseason, especially online, people talking about the quote battle. And then obviously the Randall Cobb thing happens. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, there's this 5 and then maybe somebody else. And now today that question pretty much gets answered with EQ is gone. Winfrey is gone. These guys, Begleton's gone. You got to think a number of them probably back on the practice squad, but it's kind of funny what a non-event that position group turned out to be.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be a 4-way battle royal, and then Funchess gets hurt, Winfrey gets hurt. Actually, Winfrey gets hurt, then Funchess gets hurt, EQ gets hurt, and Malik Taylor, not only last man standing, but went out and took the job by the horns.
Well, that's the thing. He didn't do it by default, right?
No.
I mean, the fact that he's out there skying on some of those back shoulder throws, and then balling out on teams, it's just a great story. And it's funny how he was there last year. He made it over the much ballyhooed Jake Kumaro because of his special teams, and everyone kind of counted him out heading into camp. It was just kind of funny how that worked out.
Where are your, obviously, again, as you know, this is not like the final 53. There's as Brian Gutekunst would aptly say, this is a 365-day a year roster building process. But when you look at kind of this potential initial 53, where are your concerns or just kind of maybe trepidations right now, if there are any?
I think it's interesting that they only went with 4 safeties.
Yeah.
I do think, like I said a little bit ago, I think there's a good chance we see Uphoff and Gaines back on the practice squad, especially now because of the fact that you have maneuverability to bring guys up a couple of times. It's almost, it's not a 53, but it's like a 56, 57 almost, with the number of ways you can manipulate the roster.
Yep.
And Brian and the guys did a great job of that last year. To me, though, like, you want that special team kind of oomph, right? You want those bodies on teams. That's the one, the safety going light there, it maybe is a bit of a surprise. But outside of that, I love that they kept Lancaster and Heflin along the D line, because I know online I saw a lot of, well, they could probably move on from Lancaster if they're going to keep Heflin. It's like, Lancaster's done a lot of good work in Green Bay. I understand he's not the most dynamic player, but I like him as a lunch pail guy. He's going to give you quality minutes on early downs. And look, you need to rotate, man. Like, some of the problems the Packers have had up front is because Kenny Clark is having to play like 90% of the snaps. I love the idea of being able to rotate not only Lancaster, Heflin, but now TJ Slayton on early downs. And yes, you are going to have Kenny up there, but now you can, maybe give Kenny a bit of a blow from time to time on early downs and have him in there on third down. Get him some one-on-one opportunities, because I do think, as Corey Linsley has said, he's one of the toughest guys in the league to block. Let him showcase that. So I was really happy they went that route on the defensive line.
Yeah, when you've got a 17-game season now, and as much work is being done in the trenches, we see teams going more run heavy than maybe we have in the the season's past.
Cyclical nature, right?
Absolutely. So I think having that extra guy makes a ton of sense. You can never have enough depth along the line. So I think that makes a ton of sense in hindsight, especially with Lancaster being a little bit banged up right now too. Having that extra guy in there makes sense. The one position that I have some slight concern over is just the depth of the cornerback position. We talked about Yadam. I don't think Shamar's quite ready yet. And then that leaves you with four, basically, right? So you've got Sullivan, you've got King, you've got Stokes, you've got Jair, with Jair being your alpha. But after that, I think, if it starts getting, you get a couple injuries here or there, and Shamar or Yadam have to play, I think that starts getting fairly shaky fairly quick. Now, most teams don't exactly have great number 5 or 6 corners, so fair enough. But that's the one position where I have slight trepidation for.
I hear you there. My one thought there, and I did kind of wonder this coming into the day, is perhaps because of a new scheme, we know the penchant for Pettine to play dime so much more than basically any other coordinator his last 2 years in Green Bay. Maybe that's not a thing of the past, but I think we're going to see more inside linebacker on the field as opposed to under Pettine, where it was just one inside backer, lots of safety kind of being replacing. And we saw some of that in camp, where Amos was dropped down. They bring in Black to that deep safety spot. But I do think Campbell and Barnes are going to be on the field a lot more in this scheme, or that's my guess anyway. So you're not going to have as many safety cornerback kind of combos, and hopefully not as much intermixing and all the guys running on and off, and some of the delay of games you take because of the miscommunication. I think things are going to be a little bit more solidified. So maybe, and this is, obviously just guesswork, throwing stuff against the wall. Maybe they thought, okay, this is our nickel. That's basically our base. Past that, we don't expect to be using 6, 7 defensive backs a game. You know what I mean? So, but I very much get you. And that, like you said, though, that is kind of the lot in life for an NFL team in general. Like, you get a spate of injuries at any position, you're going to get down to guys you don't want on the field pretty quickly, and at some point, those depth guys are going to have to play. You just hope it's not because of injury.
It's disappointing they didn't put 53 Pro Bowlers on their roster this season.
Really. Obviously that's what I would have.
I would have done too.
Clearly,
same page.
Somebody just asked about the inside linebacker position. Ty Summers is back. Is Brandy here so she can throw something at the computer? What's funny is, Kamal Martin obviously getting released, I think, was a bit of a surprise. I know his play last year was not great, but you and I were both there last summer during camp when things were shut down and there was only a handful of people. He looked good. I'm not going to say he looked great, but he looked good enough that I thought, sure, are there missteps, are there issues? Yeah, but I thought I saw enough promise there. Clearly, his play last year was subpar. It was surprising to see him come in behind Ty Summers on the depth chart this summer. Never really climbed. Never really got a chance. That once they tried him at outside backer, you had to think, okay, this is it.
Something's wrong.
This is desperation time. But that said, I think Campbell's a major improvement over what they had there last year alongside Barnes, no matter who you're throwing out there, whether it's Kirksey or whoever. Past that, again, I just don't worry about it too much because, as you were just like, most NFL teams, your frontline guys go down. Most teams don't have 3-4 guys rolling deep on the depth chart, especially at inside backer in a league where 70% of your snaps are in nickel.
And Oren Burks looks a little bit better too. We'll see what that looks like if he actually.
All right. I'm not sold on the Oren Burks stuff. All right.
Hey, I'm far from sold. I said he looks better. That is a very small hill to climb at this point.
So true. I hear you though. I hear you're right. You're right. Hey, I will. Hey, props to Oren because I think he's working his ass off. And look, you loved what you saw against the Texans, right? When Barry's sending him and he's making tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He's sacking the quarterback. It's great when you're being called a gap blitz every other down like that. Go in there with wild abandon, time up that blitz. It's awesome. But we saw against the Jets when you're having to play in space, all the old problems showed up, whether it was interior offensive linemen getting up on him and erasing him in the running game, whether it's his getting caught peeking in the backfield and his guys leaking out. Oh, there's a 20-yard gain. I don't ever see that becoming like a regular thing for Burks from scrimmage. But I will say the guy is really good on special teams. He is undoubtedly one of their core special teams players. So I'm for it for that reason alone. No doubt about it. Let's see what we got. McDuffie can flash. Brett, what did you think, Andy, about McDuffie's camp and or preseason? Because he was not available for such a long time, but I do think he certainly made a case as soon as he was, available to be on the football field.
Yeah, that number 3 preseason game certainly helped him a ton. I don't know if it's the classic case of like earning your way on the roster, but that's probably as close to it as it gets. Again, another player who was very nondescript throughout the course of camp. And a lot of that, like you mentioned, was due to injuries, not being able to be out on the field, even when he came back. And again, you kind of expect this from a guy that just wasn't out there. He's a rookie. Well, it wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot, but when given an opportunity against the Bills game to play a ton of snaps, I thought he was all over the place. I thought
he was better than I expected him to be.
Agreed.
I
totally agreed.
When they drafted him, I thought great special teams guy.
Special teams guy, yep.
He's gonna look lost in from scrimmage or basically in this scheme or whatever. Looked a lot better than I thought he was gonna look. I'll say that. I
totally agree.
Somebody just said Clay Matthews better than Oren Burks. No doubt. I have zero question about it. He's also 100 years old and doesn't play special teams. So, hey, if you want to make special teams worse than it already is, yes, sign Clay Matthews and cut Oren Burks. Great idea. I'm all in on it. Oh, and have him injured by week 3. It's great. How many linebackers did we keep? Well, here's the thing. There's no official roster yet. Of course, because the Packers are always the last team ever in the history of the NFL to announce the actual squad. But also, as we said at the top of the stream, remember, this is an initial 53. Pretty much you want to wait for about 24 hours when we see whoever the waiver claims get put in on, if they make any, because guys who make it today could very well be gone tomorrow. So I would caution anyone thinking about, this is the roster, because we are not there yet. TKM, good to see you at your post, buddy. Thanks for the super chat. Great to see you guys. Love you both. How many points does the offense need to average for wins this season, considering the change in defense? Ooh, crystal ball questions. I love these. What do you think, Andy? What do they got to average on offense?
I don't care what they need to. They're going to average a crap ton of points. Is I think the biggest thing.
Crap ton of points.
The metric crap ton of points is what they're going to average.
That's the next T-Set TV shirt. Crap ton of points.
They look better again, better subjective, whatever. It's preseason, but like Rodgers looks fantastic. I love their trio of running backs. Randall Cobb adds something at wide receiver. Tunyon looks better. Lewis is Lewis. Like I really, really like this team. The offensive line, you miss out on Corey Linsley for sure. Not having Bakhtiari, I think that is going to have to be a question that's answered kind of early in the season. But I mean, man, Matt LaFleur knows how to get people open, and Aaron Rodgers knows how to manipulate defenses. And when you have Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams on the field at the same time, I mean, it's a literal Sophie's choice, pick your poison for defenses where you just can't do both simultaneously, especially when Rodgers knows what you're trying to do at the snap. They're going to put up a ton of points, and I think it's going to be up to this defense and Joe Barry and Matt LaFleur got his guy.
Ultimately, Matt LaFleur, right?
Yeah, he got his guy now. So
this is his dude.
or at least a second choice, but still.
Oh yeah, if you're buying the Badger stuff, no doubt.
But
no
who knows?
doubt.
But I still think this defense has talent, and I think they need to live up to it. There's still a ton of resources in both early draft choices and monetary resources that are on this defense, and it's the last dance, Aaron. It's put up or shut up time.
It most certainly is the last dance, and I do think they're going to average, I would say, just north of like 34 points a game. That's my expectation. Now, are they going to meet defenses that give them problems? Of course they are. That's the NFL. But as you're saying, I mean, I think we talked about this on the sideline at camp one day, where it's just you don't know who to focus on. Like, obviously, you got Aaron Rodgers, and that's a major problem already. But then you've got Devontae, you've got Aaron Jones. I think Josiah DeGuara is going to be a problem for people. They don't even know it yet. There are so many ways for them to hurt you. And they're going to need to hurt people because that defense is going to take time to gel. And it's not even just, look, they've got a lot of continuity along the coaching front, right? Like, yes, they change coordinators and they're changing schemes, but a lot of the teaching, a lot of the voices are the same. Like, whether it's Jerry Montgomery, whether it's Jerry Gray, these guys are the same guys. So there's familiarity there. And we've heard from all the players talking about how the concepts are similar. A lot of the combinations, whether it's, games up front on the defensive line or whether it's combo coverages in the back, a lot of that is similar. So it really does come down to Joe Barry, how he calls a game, what his tendencies are, and how kind of aggressive and or close to Matt's vision they can get sooner rather than later. Because how many times last year do we hear Matt come into, then it was Zoom sessions, and talk about, I just didn't think we were aggressive enough, or I want 11 hats flying to the ball and all that stuff. And you kind of saw it towards the end of the season. Well, now, like you said, Joe's his guy. This is an extension of the head coach. This is supposed to be his imprint on the defensive side. And I do think it'll take some time, and they're going to have to win some shootouts, probably against the better team, offensively minded teams. Yeah. But if there's an offense that can win you games, pile up some W's early in the season while the defense is finding their footing, it's this Green Bay Packers offense. No doubt about it. I
totally agree. And just going back to offense for just a second, of all the players we mentioned, I'm not so sure that Robert Tonyan wasn't the MVP of training camp with how he played throughout the entirety of it. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say
that guy does not drop passes.
It is insane. It is. That's the right word for it. It is really spooky. Like, anything that's near, it's a black hole, and it just sucks to him, and it's crazy. He was so good in camp.
It's kind of ridiculous, actually. Brett says, looking like there's a lot of inexperience along terms of the offensive line. Well, that's not an incorrect read of the situation, I don't think, but there's a lot of talent there as well. And if there's a coach that I trust to mold that talent, it's Adam Stenavich. I mean, the job he's done here in Green Bay since being hired, especially after kind of the hand-wringing that was going on locally, especially on the beat about letting go of James Campen. Man, I was definitely kind of one eyebrow raised at that decision, but man, did Matt LaFleur call it right on that. And here we go. Go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, I'm not sure there's a better part of this organization right now than the front office's ability to find offensive linemen in late rounds, Adam Stanovich's ability to develop those offensive linemen, and Matt LaFleur's concept of literally just getting the best five out on the field with reckless abandon. But it's worked. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
I was just going to say, but it hasn't been just lip service, right?
No,
you hear that from coaches a lot. It's not the first time I've heard that, but it's the first time I've seen it in practice.
And to the point where,
to week.
Yeah, to the point where a guy will play left tackle one week and you have the same five guys next week, and then he might be at right guard and switch it up because of the matchups across. I absolutely love what this organization is doing with the offensive line as a whole. And like I said, I think from top to bottom, GMs then scouts finding the talent, to Stenavich developing, to LaFleur's philosophy, it's one of the best things going for this organization right now.
Very, very, very much agreed. Travis, thanks for the super chat. I don't believe it's the last dance. I'm in the camp that thinks Rodgers is back next year. I think time heals all wounds. Whoo, Travis. That's a can of worms right there, buddy. Let me just say this. Time might heal all wounds, but time also built up all the wounds that are there. This isn't something that just happened this offseason. That's been coming for a long time. put me firmly in the camp that this is the last dance. What do you think, Andy?
I am there as well, and I'm also firmly in the camp of I have no freaking clue anymore. Like I would be willing to bet quite a bit that this is the last season of Rodgers in Green Bay, but this river probably has 100 more bends in it that we don't see still coming, and nothing would shock me at this point.
Totally agree. All right, Andy, I'm going to get you out of here. I can't thank you enough for hanging out, talking Packers, talking cut down. Let's talk football. We're going to be back doing this every week, buddy. So I hope you're ready.
I'm
We're
ready.
going to be talking football every week with Andy Herman, the Don of the Pack-A-Day podcast, and Packer Report legend,
Whatever.
the man who if you need Packers info, Andy's your dude. Andy, I can't thank you enough for hanging out, talking Packers. Thanks so much. Thanks to everybody in the comments. Thanks for sticking with us, talking Packers. Always appreciate you. Andy, we'll see you on the internet, buddy.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me.